Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. We're looking forward to a really great conversation today on university and industry partnerships. So thank you all for joining us, tuning in on this June afternoon. We really appreciate you taking time. My name is Chris Berry. I am the president of OhioX. We are a statewide technology and innovation partnership working to help make Ohio a leading tech hub. And so I'm excited about this conversation because we're bridging and telling some of the stories and sharing some of the stories of some of the examples of how Ohio can do that. And it's our universities, the R&D, the research and development, exciting startups and tech-focused companies that are coming together. And so today we're going to be talking with folks within Ohio University's innovation ecosystem who will share some of their stories on how they're doing it and how this is working and examples that perhaps can hopefully inspire more of this. And so as we start, I want to thank our event partner and sponsor for this, which is the Ohio Innovation Exchange. And so this is an incredible resource for all Ohioans, businesses that helps you find university experts, equipment, services. And the Ohio Innovation Exchange, what they do is they connect businesses and industry with professors, equipment, and facilities available at Ohio's research universities. And they help foster access to thousands of faculty and resources from campuses, laboratories across the state. And the Innovation Exchange fosters economic development, intellectual advancement across Ohio and the globe. This is an initiative out of the Ohio Department of Higher Education that's been collaborative and developed with Ohio's universities, including Ohio University, and also industry support from the Ohio Manufacturing Institute. And so if you're not familiar with the Ohio Innovation Exchange, we'd absolutely recommend that you check it out. Go there to ohioinnovationexchange.org, and you can find all sorts of information, all the different university collaborations that you can use and utilize. And again, university experts, equipment, and services. And so thank you to the Innovation Exchange for their partnership, their support, helping make conversations like this possible. And so I'll go back a slide as we start to introduce some of our speakers today. And so I'm going to do a one-on-one introduction of each, ask each of them to share a little bit about who they are, the perspective that they're bringing to today's conversation, and some of the work that they're doing. Some of this is incredible work, incredible R&D that's been happening, spinning out technology commercializations. And again, all comes back to these university and industry partnerships, which are so exciting. And so as we begin, we're going to start with, we'll go with Brian Clark first, who's speaking with us from Athens, Ohio, Ohio University. And as we were testing our technology, I joked that I was down there this past weekend. And so it's great to hear what's going on because I was able to see some of the facilities at Ohio University over the weekend. But Brian, thank you so much for joining us. You do a ton. I would read off all of your different titles and everything, but I'll kind of let you do that. So maybe you can stop and pause for each one and the incredible work and background. But, you know, in short, you're a professor at Ohio University, but you're also the chief of aging research at OsteoDx, which we'll be talking with one of your colleagues and some of that university industry partnership. But Brian, thank you so much for joining us. And if you could share a little bit about your work at Ohio University and then also the startup work you're doing too.
Sure. Thanks, Chris. So as Chris mentioned, my name is Brian Clark. I'm a professor of physiology and neuroscience in the Department of Biomedical Sciences, where I also hold the Clybourne research chair position, and I direct the Ohio Musculoskeletal and Neurological Institute. All of that is basically within the College of Medicine here at Ohio University. I've been at OU for, I think, 15 or 16 years. My formal training, I come from a sort of a basic science biology background as an undergraduate, and then in my graduate training, I pivoted more into applied physiology and human physiology, exercise physiology, space in particular. And for most of my career, I've been focusing on issues related to aging. And I have my hands in a lot of different pots, but one of the pots that I've kept my hands in pretty heavily the past 5 years is trying to improve the technological basis for diagnosing osteoporosis or poor skeletal health in people who are at risk of experiencing a fragility fracture as we get older. There's a lot of variability. I literally 5 minutes ago, we just finished testing an 89-year-old man whose bone health by our current diagnostic standards was fantastic. And that's very encouraging. I love seeing the oldest old who are prospering and thriving and living independently. And so some of the work that I'm working on with OsteoDx is trying to improve our diagnostics ability of people who need to improve their skeletal health. There's been really great advances in the therapeutics over the past couple of decades as it relates to enhancing bone health, but we still don't have the technologies to really know the people who are in most need of receiving those therapeutics. So that's a lot of the work that we've been focused on.
Well, thank you, Brian. Really appreciate you being here and taking time to share the work that is happening on campus. And actually, we'll go next to Gary, your colleague at OsteoDx. Gary is the CEO, and so this is one of those examples: university research and development, university experts, and Gary is on the business side and helping spin out this technology and turn it into a company and bringing to market some incredible research and development. So Gary, if you could just share a little bit about yourself, your background, and what you're doing as the CEO.
Sure, I'd be happy to. Again, my name is Gary Wakeford. I'm the Chief Executive Officer for OsteoDx. And I was brought in February of last year to get involved and to really assess the business and the opportunity and to help pull all facets of an early stage startup company together so that we could keep moving forward in achieving the milestones that were set forth by the company. I am Ohio born and raised and love the state with all my heart. I live up in the Youngstown, Ohio area and have both my degrees from Youngstown State. And I was thrilled to have an opportunity to work with an Ohio university, that really has the potential to be truly a groundbreaking technology. Brian had talked a little bit about, how we're approaching this and the need for such a product, but a lot of people I don't think realize the magnitude and the scope of the problem. There are 2.3 million fragility fractures every year in the United States, and it's costing the healthcare system $19 billion. That's billion with a B. And this is a particularly strong problem in our female population. Postmenopausal women 50 and older, 50% of them, or 1 in 2 of them, will have a fragility fracture. And a big part of the problem is the current standard of care just does not adequately identify patients' risk factor. And that's where we ultimately think we'll be able to bring a significant solution to the table. So I've been involved for just over a year, with an early stage startup. My primary role is to raise money and to build notoriety for the company and to get the funds and the resources that people like Brian need to continue to support the studying and the testing and the education that we've been doing on this. So we've achieved a number of successes recently, and I think we have a really strong team and truly very excited to be doing this in and with the people in Ohio.
Well, thank you, Gary. Really appreciate it. And I'm looking forward to digging more into it because, again, that's really exciting seeing startups and the technology being spun out and the commercialization. And so I'm looking forward to more of our conversation. We'll go next to Dan Connell, who's a Senior Vice President Strategy at CONSOL Energy. In addition to that, you also do some work with Ohio University. So Dan, welcome. Thank you so much for sharing some of your story, but maybe tell us about your business and what you do at CONSOL, but then also your role of the collaboration with Ohio University too.
Sure. Thank you, Chris, and good afternoon, everyone. As Chris mentioned, my name is Dan Connell. Work for CONSOL Energy. CONSOL is a producer and exporter of coal primarily, and we've been in that business for a very long time, more than 150 years. Started up in 1864. We are based in the Pittsburgh area. Our primary operation is located in southwestern Pennsylvania and northern West Virginia. It's the largest underground coal mining complex in North America. We also own and operate an export terminal in the port of Baltimore. So in many respects, we're a very mature industry. In other respects, we're kind of a new venture with a new lease on life. So in 2017, we were spun out from our former parent company. And that has given us the opportunity, kind of as we enter a dynamic time in the energy space, to really take advantage of our legacy in innovation and focusing on sustainability and ESG type things to hopefully take the lead in repositioning our company and the entire space. I actually started my career with CONSOL in its research and development department about 19 years ago. Worked there for about a decade. One of the first projects I worked on was with Ohio University, Dr. Kevin Christ in the chemical engineering department. We're looking at ambient air quality and mercury emissions in the Appalachian region at that time. You know, the current partnership that we have with Jason Trembly, you know, I think is really focused on ways in which we can take a resource that's traditionally been used for energy generation and repurpose it into sustainable uses with vastly different emissions and sustainability profiles. And we're looking at making carbon composite materials with coal, or more specifically waste coal, being the primary feedstock. So a lot of exciting work going on, making a lot of great progress, and excited to see what the future brings as we continue this collaboration.
That's great. Thank you so much, Dan. And again, appreciate you taking the time to share some of your work in the story today. Next, we will go to Jason, who is the Russ Professor of Mechanical Engineering and the Director of the Institute for Sustainable Energy and the Environment at Ohio University. So Jason, welcome. Thank you so much for being here. And if you could share a little bit about your work and maybe some of the partnership that you've done with Dan and CONSOL.
Absolutely. Thank you, Chris, and thank you for the opportunity to discuss our research here. As you mentioned, I am a professor in mechanical engineering department here at Ohio University, and also am Ohio University alumnus, and I'm a chemical engineer by training. Before joining the university here, I have a little bit different perspective, from an academic position, being that I worked as a team leader for CO2 and syngas conversion at RTI International, and also worked for the U.S. Department of Energy through an ORISE fellowship during graduate school. And so I brought those perspectives into, a lot of my academic research here, at the university. The work that my group and myself really focus on is really a wide-ranging application of looking at sustainability within broad arrays of industries. And we have active research looking at, addressing water quality issues, whether that is produced water management from oil and gas operations, nutrient recovery from animal waste, CO2 utilization, and carbon capture. But in respect to what we're going to discuss today is looking at addressing sustainability in the building and construction sector. So, that really became of interest to us looking at that sector. So it accounts for around, 11% of GHG emissions now across all sectors. And looking at the decarbonization of, say, the transportation sector and power generation sector, that percentage is going to increase. And so we believe, we've developed some unique ways of utilizing carbon chemistry to develop more sustainable materials that have lower embodied energy emissions in comparison to existing, say, cement or, metal-based materials. And when looking at that carbon chemistry, what we've really found is that we can go to coal, whether that's newly mined, or also utilization of, reclaimed coal resources from, mining waste, legacy impoundments, et cetera, and pull those into making, advanced carbon materials that have, limited emissions. So really providing a very different paradigm in which to use coal to meet, our society's needs.
Well, thank you, Jason. Really appreciate that, and looking forward to digging into some more of that. But to start, Gary and Brian, I do want to talk about and not bury some recent good news, but OsteoDx received a $2 million grant from the National Institutes of Health. And in addition, to that, well, if we could dig in a little bit to just what that news is, what it means, But this is part of that collaboration of Ohio University, Tech Growth Ohio, Ohio's Third Frontier program. And so, perhaps Gary, we can start with you. I see you're unmuted, and also you were quoted in some of the media I read on the piece. But could you talk a lot about this, because this is very competitive. This is part of kind of a national, the National Institutes of Health, which is a really big deal. So congratulations. But what does this mean, and what will these types of funds help your company do?
Well, first of all, thank you. And yeah, I think this is a perfect example of, really good, solid collaboration at its best. There's no doubt that without Brian's help in his input and his background in helping us to write that grant and put the grant together, we would have had a much, much more difficult time in being selected. As you can imagine, a $2 million grant, it's a very, very competitive process. We scored an incredibly high rating on the grant application. From day one, when we got the initial word back from the NIH, we all felt confident that we would, in fact, be funded. But there's the old saying that you buy the champagne when you get the notification, but you don't pop the cork until the money's in the bank. So we really waited a few months, and we got the formal notification on May 18th. Just this past month. But what this will do is it will pay for a 5-site multi-center study of our technology that we will use to further validate the efficacy of the technology. And that's huge, because that type of work would have to have been done whether we got this grant or not. And that basically would mean we would have had to have raised $2 million from investors that would have diluted everyone's ownership and stock and things of that nature. So it was a huge, huge opportunity for the company to move forward. And I will kind of stop there and let Brian talk about the specifics of what we'll measure and what the study will ultimately do for the company and the technology.
Sure. Yeah. So Gary did a nice job of summarizing it. I mean, it's effectively a study that's trying to, provide pivotal clinical data showing clinical utility of our cortical bone mechanics technology, which is the concept of we actually measure the mechanical properties of the bone by vibrating it and measuring the sort of the resonance response back as what we hypothesize to be a more robust predictor of fractures than measuring the chemical properties or the density of the bone. And this is a study that's got multiple sites across the nation. Ohio University is one of the sites, but there's also Indianapolis University in Indiana University in Indianapolis, University of South Florida, University of Florida. So it's a multi-site study with Ohio being the coordinating center, where we'll deploy our cortical bone mechanics technology, and we'll obtain stiffness readings of a long bone from 150 or so postmenopausal women that have received a fracture, as well as about 250 or 300 postmenopausal women who have not fractured. And in addition to that, we'll also obtain bone mineral density readings using the more classic clinical gold standard of dual energy X-ray absorptiometry to see whether our technology is better able to discriminate those who have fractured from those who have not, as well as whether there's any additive value of putting the technologies together. So it's a perfect example of, this is a grant that's specifically a small business innovation research grant that's from the company that then has a pretty big subcontract award to universities across the nation to help carry out the scope of work. So it's a perfect example of what we're talking about today. And this particular one is from the National Institute on Aging.
Thank you, Brian. And again, congratulations to both of you and the entire team. And incredible news. So it was really fun to see that. And I saw it in a few different places. So the good news was getting out, which was fantastic. But Jason, I'd love to kick it over to you to kind of continue this conversation at a bit of a higher level of just the potential for bringing together, university research experts with the private sector. And as we think about partnerships between industry and university, and you have been at both sides of it and sat on both ends of it as both a research chemical engineer at a private company, and then also now as a university professor. So again, you've sat at both sides of the table. Could you talk a little bit about, what are the benefits for partnering between, the two worlds? And in your experience, what makes successful partnerships?
So there's definitely advantages and benefits on both sides of the table, whether it's for industry or academia. Starting on the industry side, based upon my experience, and Dan can touch upon this more so, but where I see the value there is industry. By partnering with academia, it's able to access intellectual capital that it doesn't necessarily have within its own organization. Access to cutting edge ideas that have commercial potential. And one of the other major benefits that I see is the ability to work with our students. These are potential future employees for their organization. So being able to work with them, mentor them, and help prepare them for their future career paths, I think is definitely a benefit. On the academic side, I see there being a plethora of benefits, from the faculty side of things, working with industry, understanding, industry's line of thinking really helps focus and hone in on our ideas and really develop and identify the value proposition, of our ideas or technologies, et cetera. And also, I think, helps also, prepare us, in terms of future ideas, developing those ideas and how to work with them. In terms of working with industry, what makes it successful, I think, is really, understanding where, say my technologies, where the ideas are, the issues that we're solving, and identifying the industry partners that are trying to solve those same issues where they align. So, for instance, the projects that we have with Dan and CONSOL Energy, we're working with them, engineer profiles and bringing in some other companies at, bringing in different skill sets to try to help commercialize these composite materials that we are developing. And to me, that really makes it successful, is whenever you can identify those industry partners where their, business perspective, values and focus align, with your own.
Thanks, Jason. And Dan, kicking it over to you now, about, perhaps sharing some of the benefits on the private sector and industry side. But then also, could you talk a little bit about maybe kind of second question for you is, you're also a member of the Ohio University Russ College Industry Advisory Board, and why personally do you get involved with that? Because I'm sure you're incredibly busy and you have a full plate at work, and I'm sure home too. But some of those things kind of beyond, and the passion, where does that come from?
Yeah, I guess maybe to expand upon what Jason was talking about first, and then I'll take the second question as well. But I think Jason and I are very much aligned in our thoughts on this, because many of the points that he raised would have been my primary points. Just to expand upon those, access to intellectual capital. When I talk about the types of projects that we've been working on with Ohio University, they are not what you would consider to be mainstream whole company projects. I mean, we're talking atmospheric emissions modeling. We're talking building materials development, areas that we certainly do not have the subject matter expertise to tackle, but that nonetheless are very relevant to our industry and the direction that we want to move. So there's a great ability to kind of leverage the breadth of expertise that a university like Ohio U brings to the table, and make a lot of progress without having to make a huge investment, in your own internal resources for something that may start out being exploratory in nature. And it allows us to really broaden our spectrum of work, which I think is key to succeeding in innovation. And the interplay between kind of the commercialization focus that the industry partner brings, and let's say the wealth of ideas that the university brings, we have found results in a very positive outcome in many cases, which I would say the work that we're doing right now is a testament to. You also kind of end up with maybe unlikely relationships being established. Jason mentioned Engineered Profiles, an extrusion company located in Columbus, Ohio. CONSOL Energy, a coal producer located in Canonsburg, PA. Who would have ever thought that the two of us would be working jointly on commercializing a technology developed in Athens? So, lots of opportunities, lots of possibilities, some that you would have never guessed would happen can come from this work. Regarding the advisory board, I think when you look at the role that a university like Ohio plays, as Jason mentioned, it has multiple facets. One of those is innovating and helping to bring ideas to society that can ultimately be beneficial. Another one is really training the workforce of the future. So I think it's very important that there's an open dialogue between industry and the future employer of that workforce and the institutions that are doing the training, to make sure that curriculum is aligned with needs, and also to make sure that the dots are being connected. One of the really rewarding things about the advisory board discussions is that you've got at the table not only the dean, but representatives from multiple disciplines within the College of Engineering, who may not necessarily be talking and interacting on a daily basis. And then you have a diversity of industries, big companies, smaller businesses, a variety of fields of focus. So again, you end up connecting dots that may lead to synergistic collaborations down the road that you wouldn't have thought would otherwise materialize. So those opportunities, and I think, again, the continued need to develop a workforce with the skill set that industry needs, make it really a no-brainer to participate in something like that.
Thanks, Dan. And I asked, and I loved your answer on the advisory board. And that's really the reason I asked, because I've seen it deployed in a lot of successful instances where it's a great way for business executives and industry leaders to get involved, and kind of that first step into making connections that can maybe lead to some bigger opportunities for partnership and others. And so great to see that you're utilizing it to success, and it's certainly had, it looks like, an impact on your work. But Brian, I'd love to go to you to kind of talk about that other side of, you're doing all this research, you're doing all this work in academia on campus. How do you view the opportunities for commercialization that are happening? And, maybe as an example, how do you balance that of working with OsteoDx and working with Gary with the work that's happening on campus?
So there's, I guess, two answers to that. My view on commercialization was fundamentally changed about 4 or 5 years ago when we went through the I-Corps at Ohio program. This is a program that's modeled on the NSF's program, and I always sort of joke that it was boot camp, entrepreneur boot camp for scientists. And it really gave me a very different perspective, not only on commercialization opportunities, but pretty much on how I spend my day-to-day time with our science as well, that if we want to have impact, we need to be able to translate it. So that gave me a very different view that I had not had previously. So I highly encourage people who are remotely thinking about commercialization opportunities to aggressively go after and get into one. NIH has them now. There's a bunch of these opportunities out there to really let you vet your ideas. My role with OsteoDx is nuanced in as much that, as I sort of mentioned, I have my hands in a lot of scientific pots. My formal training and what I would consider to be my primary focus is actually related to neuromuscular physiology, not osteoporosis diagnostics and development. It's even a whole different system, right? My system that I mainly focuses on is the connections between nerves and muscles, not the connection to bone as much. I got into the bone space because one of my close collaborators who has recently retired was doing work in this space. So I to some extent, I'm kind of picking up and trying to carry the football that she started down the field with. That was Ann Laux and her husband, Lynn Bowman. And so if it wasn't for OsteoDx, I probably would not be swimming in that swimming pool right now. So to some extent, my roles with the university and my role with OsteoDx are pretty discrete because of sort of the historical nature that I've sort of tried to keep this going. I think with that said, they all centrally come back to aging systems, though. So there's clearly a lot of overlap, but I try my best to keep these swim lanes clean for conflict of interest purposes. And in my case, it's a little bit easier because of the scope of work. But I mean, certainly some of the science and the theories overlap.
Thank you, Brian. And Gary, I'd love to go to your perspective on the opportunity as an entrepreneur, as a business executive, working with the university and coming in to be the CEO of a startup that is taking research that's happened on campus and commercializing it. Is this your first foray into this world of spinning out a startup, or has this been part of your career? Because our group, we talk with a lot of business folks, a lot of tech-focused leaders, a lot of entrepreneurs and startup founders, and I think I can just see so much potential between all the great work happening on campus as Ohio's tech sector and startup economy continues to grow and expand, and really OsteoDx being an example of success story for this. So what was it for you and your background that drew you to this opportunity?
Well, to answer your question, no, this is not the first time I've been involved with an early stage startup. I've spent most of my career in the medical device field with either truly startup companies from ground zero, and I've also been involved with companies that were still privately held but were generating revenue. This is my first direct collaboration with taking a university developed product to market. I've done it the other way around, where I have had products where we were independently able to get FDA approval, and then I've worked closely with different universities to do the clinical trials and the testing and things of that nature. But this is the first time that I've taken a university developed technology to marketplace. It's always an exciting thing. For me personally, this opportunity checked off all of the boxes that are important to me. As I mentioned earlier, I'm Ohio born and raised. Truly love the state of Ohio with my entire heart, and I mean that sincerely when I say that. So to have an opportunity to work with an Ohio university with a product that had significant opportunity in the marketplace, that was really important to me. And when I look at the potential to do good out there, it's absolutely huge. I mean, this is a huge problem that's costing billions of dollars. It's only going to get bigger for our lifetime. One of the things we show on our slide is the U.S. Census Bureau estimates that by the year 2034, which isn't all that far away, for the first time in the history of our country, there will be more people 65 and older than there will be 18 and younger. And it's just a pretty simple equation to understand. The more elderly people we have, the more osteoporosis there will be, and the more osteoporosis, the more fractures. So it's really important that we try to get this figured out now. Now, combining and working with a university like we have in this situation, when you've got someone like Brian and his background, nationally recognized person in this field, it gives you instant credibility. And, when we went to look to make our application for the phase 2 grant, Brian reached out to his network, and within 2 to 3 weeks, we had our sites lined up and ready to go. That's unheard of. You can take 6 to 12 months trying to get sites lined up and on board. So when you're working with the university and with the people involved at the university, that gives you a certain level of credibility right out of the gate. And then we just add our business acumen to that so that people look at the whole team and investors check off their boxes. All right, they got a solid technology, they've got solid IP, which is the very first thing any investor will look at. If you're not IP protected, they're like, good luck, but you're not getting money from me, And then they look at the experience level of the business team. Do you have people that have successfully taken a product to market, built a company, and had a successful exit? So very happy to report, at this stage of the game, we check off all of those boxes and look forward to checking off more as we continue to grow.
That's great. Thank you, Gary. And Jason, I'd love to pivot a bit to the work you're doing at the Institute for Sustainable Energy and the Environment at OU for a couple of reasons. As the academia world, but for the work we do and that I've been focused on, we're seeing more and more, not just from larger technology movements around things like clean tech, but also here in Ohio, there's a lot of exciting progress for electric vehicles, renewable batteries. And so I think of, Gary, up in your part of the state, the Mahoning Valley, which is a rich and proud manufacturing history and tradition, increasingly is becoming known as Voltage Valley because of some of the work that they're doing. And so as we see these kind of really broad economic trends and movements, there's an important place for Ohio to play in that as a state. And so at the Institute, how do you view these kind of bigger trends and themes? And are you seeing increasing opportunities for some of these industry academia partnerships as they maybe become more prevalent in kind of the world, if you will?
In terms of, I think in order to really address, a lot of the, issues and some of these upcoming ideas, it really will take, university industry partnerships. There's a lot of fantastic ideas that are sitting there at universities. But one of the things that we're really not great about is being able to, scale and really implement those solutions, in such a platform that it actually becomes useful for society. I can use an example of our work with, say, Dan and CONSOL and engineer profiles, right? So we were developing these composite materials. We had worked on them for about a year and a half. And so looking at being able to, scale that technology and being able to potentially offer that as a real product, that would have taken us years to be able to do that at the university, to develop the capabilities, the facilities, the know-how. But then working with CONSOL and engineer profiles, we were able to take something, from laboratory to easily integrate it into a commercial manufacturing facility, and then, ultimately being able now to, make real commercial, product prototypes that we were, going through testing for to assess them for these commercial applications. So I think that's the real key, and Ohio has a lot of, we have a lot of innovative universities, and we also have a lot of innovative companies, not just in the state, but, in the surrounding, region as well, which provide a lot of opportunities for collaborations to develop these ideas and really to push them out into market.
Thank you, Jason. I appreciate that. And Dan, I'd like to, take your perspective on that as the energy sector that you're in every day continues to shape and evolve. How does, it's one thing for a startup and a smaller organization to work with the university because kind of by definition, it's small, startups are smaller, they're quicker, they can try things and break things. As companies get bigger, that can sometimes be more difficult where it has to be a little more targeted in partnerships and making sure that you're measuring outcomes. But as these things shape and evolve, as we look at energy, renewables, clean tech, those types of things, innovation in your sector, how does that work for maybe a larger company and the potentials for partnering with universities?
Sure. No, and I think, going back to kind of the regional opportunities that you touched on in the Mahoning Valley, when you look at kind of the Appalachian region and where a lot of CONSOL's footprint is located, where Ohio University is located. This is an area that has been, an industrial backbone, an energy backbone for the nation for a number of years, and is really at a crossroads right now. So I think the desire and need to innovate kind of comes naturally to this region. And I think Jason would probably agree, we're both coming with that perspective to the table, maybe from slightly different angles. But when you hear Institute for Sustainable Energy and the Environment, that's exactly the direction that a company in this region is trying to move. I mentioned CONSOL, has our major operations in Pennsylvania, West Virginia, and Maryland. We do still have a pretty strong presence in Ohio. We have close to 9,000 surface acres that we control. We have some legacy mining properties that we're working to reclaim. More than 10% of our workforce lives in the state of Ohio, and we're truly vested in the region. So we're looking at opportunities. How do we take that surface and put it to use for something sustainable moving forward? Renewable energy opportunities. We're looking at some of those within the state right now. The waste coal, do we turn it into sustainable building products? Do we use it as fuel for a carbon neutral power plant? These are all big challenges. I think the energy transition as a whole is a big challenge, but they're also big opportunities for the region. And when you kind of couple the innovative idea generation from a university like Ohio with the commercial need from industry, good things can happen.
Well, thank you, Dan. Appreciate that. And we'll do kind of one final kind of topic and question before we start to wrap up our conversation with a few of kind of last comments, and also a fun one that we try to do for all of ours. But Gary, I'd love to go to you because, again, I know, part of the audience for today and that'll be watching this is more of an on-demand product, come from universities, come from academia, but also there's an important audience, especially as, we're trying to tell this story of the Ohio Innovation Exchange and the benefits of the private sector and industry reaching out and partnering with universities. And so as a business executive, now the CEO of a startup that, has been spun out, we've kind of talked about some of this today. But what would that message be to other executives like yourself that are maybe working across the state and beyond, of the benefits and how they could, if they were maybe in your shoes a few years ago, how they can find out about some of these opportunities, whether it's advisory boards all the way to finding opportunities to help take some of these amazing innovations to market?
I would say the first thing I would do is take the time to do just a little bit of research. The state of Ohio has a tremendous amount of support for entrepreneurial companies. Just the state funded entrepreneurial services that have helped me with different companies along the way. You've got Jumpstart, and again, I'm mostly up in the northeastern part of the state, but there's Jumpstart, which has been incredibly helpful. In Akron, they have Bounce, which is very involved with early stage startups. Here in the Youngstown area, we have the Youngstown Business Incubator. They deal mainly with software companies, but they also were, during the Obama administration, had won a huge federal grant to fund additive manufacturing technology here at the YBI. And I think it's been about 3 years ago, they were actually named the #1 university-based business incubator in the world. That's right here in Ohio. So Ohio has a tremendous effort through Third Frontier and other projects that they have to fund early stage companies. So do your homework, reach out to these state organizations. With Google, you can find out anything in a day or two. Take the time to research these organizations. And then the next step is, I'm not a proponent of applying to everything and talking to everybody and sending everything out there. Do a little bit of homework. Look for those organizations that closely mirror what it is you're trying to do. Find the organizations that tend to fund the type of business you're in, or the type of technology you're trying to develop, or the type of industry that you're gearing up for. Try to make as good a match as you can, and then put all your effort into going after that. But find a way to connect the dots, and tap into your network. It's amazing. You probably have a lot of connections that can help get you in front of the right people, but they won't do it if they don't know what you're trying to do. So, work your connections, both public and private. And there's a lot of help out there to be had.
Well, thank you, Gary. And now that we have about 15 minutes or so left before the top of the hour, 14 minutes, I just saw the clock tick, but we'll do a couple quick answers. Don't necessarily have to be all that quick, round robin questions, and we'll do it alphabetically. So we'll go Brian, Dan, Jason, and then Gary wrap up, and we'll do it twice around. But the first one, and Brian, we'll go to you, is just an opportunity. Anything we either didn't talk about today, or a message that you want to make sure you get out there for maybe either colleagues in academia or potential partners, or people that can find inspiration from your work in the private sector, on how partnerships between these two sectors can potentially really help drive innovation and move the ball forward.
I mean, it's exciting. I think that's, people in academia are motivated by things they find exciting. Generally speaking, I think people who end up in academia are very passionate about what they do. And I think a lot of folks in academia, me probably being one of them many years ago, chose to go into academia because they didn't want to go into business. So that's sort of like they had this aversion. But I got to be honest with you, once I started doing it, I got a passion for it. It's actually exciting. It's how we make impact. I've worked extensively and in nuanced detail with OsteoDx now for many years, but we've also had other industry partnerships within our research institute and research program for many years, doing early phase clinical trials for various drug companies and things of that nature. And being on that cutting edge is, it's exciting. So I think that's my advice to folks who sit on my side of the fence is embrace it and enjoy it.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Brian. And Dan, we'll head over your way now. And any kind of final thoughts or anything that we didn't get to today that you want to share?
Sure. Maybe just a few thoughts, not necessarily totally related, but I did want to give a shout out to Jason. I've dealt with a number of university partnerships through the years, and I would say probably better than any other, Jason approached us with the right pitch. He had a techno-economic evaluation done. He had a life cycle analysis done. And, I think when successful, these types of partnerships result in alignment on what the goal is, and result in a much more focused research effort. Jason just had a great jumpstart on that. Maybe tied to that is the fact that once you get going and get some success, these things can turn into very fruitful partnerships that have a lot of staying power. We started working with Jason on the cold plastic composites a couple of years ago. Since then, we've won 2 more proposals. We've submitted some additional proposals. Jason's begun working with Seafoam out of Triadelphia, West Virginia, which is another company that CONSOL is engaged with. So this has grown to a much bigger collaboration than we probably ever envisioned when we sat in CONSOL's conference room a few years ago and talked through the concept. And I expect a lot more great things to come. And it's great because we're engaged. I mean, this is just not funding changing hands. This is site visits, brainstorming sessions, engagement kind of between students, professors, various people within the organization. And it truly is a partnership. Again, we're excited about what can come from this.
That's great. Well, thank you, Dan, for sharing that. Really appreciate it. And Jason, we'll go to you next.
The piece that I would really emphasize, especially on the academic side, is to, embrace, communication and dialogue with industry perspectives. To Dan's point, it's amazing to see, you start out with a core idea or concept, which is the basis, say, of a first discussion, but then, it expands quickly, and new ideas, synergisms really start to pop up, and areas that you would never consider yourself to, have capabilities in or, have thought of working in before really start to, come out where you have, advantages and some real opportunities, for ideas. And so that would be my biggest point, is just, keeping an open mind and be willing to have, discussions, with industry.
Thank you, Jason. And Gary, we'll head over to you before we wrap up with our final question.
Sure. The one thing that I would share with anyone looking to become an entrepreneur or start a company, more than anything else, is just remember that speed matters. And I really mean that. There always has to be a sense of urgency. One of my favorite quotes is, leaders don't always make the right decision, but they always decide. Look at what you're doing, make your decisions, and move on. Much, much better to implement a good plan today than wait a month or 2 or 3 to implement a perfect plan. You could be lost in the dust by doing that. So, charge forward, use your best intellect, make your best decisions. And when you see a decision was wrong, swallow your pride, just check it up, to experience and say, okay, we tried that, it didn't work, it's time to do a course correction. But speed matters. And in the early going, the 2 things you have the least of are time and money. So you have to be as efficient as you can with both.
Right. Well, thank you, Gary. And we'll do one final round robin, but a fun question to end with, as we have a few minutes left together today. But it's, what is your favorite place in Ohio? And so this can be a spot that if you have family or friends coming into town, you take them to. Maybe it's a restaurant somewhere. We've had a lot of popular answers for, football games and baseball games and stuff like that. So we'll start again. Brian, we'll go Brian, Dan, Jason, and Gary. You'll finish us up. So Brian, what's your favorite spot in Ohio?
So I'll be quick. If it's a location, meaning not a town, it's probably Franklin Park Conservatory in Columbus. And if it's a town, it's Yellow Springs.
I was in Athens and Yellow Springs this weekend, so kind of 2 sides of the state, but both really cool with a lot of great outdoor stuff to do. So thank you for sharing that. Dan, what about you?
I don't live in Ohio, though I am sitting in a hotel room in Columbus right now. But and Jason's probably hoping my answer is when I come to visit him in Athens. But it's actually Amish country, kind of the Berlin, Ohio area. My wife and I went there for our honeymoon, and we've been back pretty much every year since for our anniversary. But a peaceful scenic escape. So really enjoy it.
Very cool. Well, thank you, Dan. That another great one, especially if you go in the fall with the leaves changing and everything. It's pretty cool. And I didn't know you were in Columbus, so it's good to kind of virtually see you from down the street. So yep. Thanks for being here. Jason, how about you?
I would say probably for an area Upper Ohio Valley, so the Ohio River Valley in the fall when the foliage is out is absolutely amazing. And a particular place, I would say, Day of Riding Coasters at Cedar Point.
No, they're good. We're 3 for 3. So Gary, no pressure on a fun place in Ohio, but where's it for you?
For me, I think it would probably be Salt Fort State Park down there along Cambridge, along 77. It's about 7 miles off the interstate. It's absolutely beautiful, especially in the fall. Beautiful lake, beautiful golf course, great place to kind of forget about the world for a week and just, turn all the phones and computers off.
Perfect way to end it. So everyone, thank you so much for attending. Want to thank, before we officially wrap up, again, the Ohio Innovation Exchange, the folks at Ohio University for helping make this possible. I just dropped the website and the link, so be sure to save it, bookmark it, check it out if you haven't. Incredible resources. And so again, thank you to the folks at Ohio University and the Ohio Innovation Exchange for making this possible. And most importantly, thank you, Brian, Dan, Jason, and Gary for joining us today, sharing a little bit about your work. This hour flew by because it's been so much fun to hear about what's new, including a really big NIH funding that came out. So congratulations again to Gary and Brian and Dan and Jason. Thanks for sharing your work, and really appreciate everyone for joining us today. Thank you so much for your time, and we will see you all again soon sometime. So have a great day, everyone. Bye-bye.
Take care. Thanks.